The Earth 300,000 years ago is a planet shaped by cold. Vast sheets of ice spread across the northern continents, descending from the polar latitudes into what is now Europe, Asia, and North America. These glaciers are immense kilometers thick, in places pressing down on the land beneath their weight. Where today there are rolling fields or cities, the landscape is locked beneath frozen mass. Sea levels are lower than in the present by dozens of meters, as so much of the planet's water is trapped in solid form. Continental shelves lie bare and exposed, transformed into wide plains, where rivers cut new channels and herds of animals wander. The Earth is in the middle of an Ice Age, part of a long series of glacial cycles that stretch back millions of years. Yet even in this age of cold, warmth is never absent for long. The planet breathes in rhythms dictated by its orbit and tilt, shifting sunlight and temperature in grand cycles. These are the Milankovitch cycles, slow dances of the Earth around the Sun that govern ice, ocean and wind. 300,000 years ago, this planetary choreography places the world deep in a glacial phase. Winters are long and harsh in the higher latitudes. Summers are brief and muted. In Africa, the climate is cooler and drier than in later times, but savannas and forests still sustain rich life. In Europe, tundra stretches southward. In Asia, steppe and grassland dominate, spreading across a continent that feels colder and more open than the one familiar to us. The southern continents experience different patterns. In South America, great grasslands extend where rainforests now stand. Australia lies isolated, its megafauna adapted to dry expanses. Antarctica, already locked in ice, continues its long vigil at the bottom of the globe, reflecting sunlight back into space and amplifying the chill. One detail stands out in this frozen world. Coastlines look alien. The English Channel is not yet filled with water connecting Britain directly to the mainland of Europe. Across Asia, the Sea of Japan is smaller, its coast reaching farther out. Southeast Asia is not the archipelago of islands we know, but a vast connected landmass called Sunda bridging what are now Borneo, Java and Sumatra to the continent. Between Asia and Australia stretches another exposed shelf called Sahel, making passage easier for animals and in much later times people. The Earth's shape is familiar, yet its boundaries are shifted, revealing a geography of hidden lands. The skies over this Earth are governed by winds that sweep dust from deserts, carrying it across continents. Ice cores drilled in Antarctica reveal traces of this dust even today, tiny fragments locked in frozen time. These records tell us that the world then was drier, with great deserts more expansive than those of the present. The Sahara, though still immense, was in flux, sometimes green with scattered lakes, sometimes barren. Such shifts would later play a role in the pathways of early humans. In this moment, 300 millennia before our time, the Sahara tends toward dryness, its sands spreading far under a harsher sun. The oceans, cooler and more nutrient-rich, circulate with powerful currents. The Gulf Stream, the Humboldt Current, and the Kuroshio all transport energy across the globe. Marine life flourishes in regions where cold waters upwell, feeding plankton that sustain fish and larger predators. Whales follow these pathways, moving in patterns little changed even after so many ages. One can imagine a shoreline of the Mediterranean lower and wider than today, with shallow bays teeming with shellfish. Farther north, the North Sea is not yet a sea, but a grassy plain inhabited by herds of bison and mammoths, a land that would later be swallowed when the ice melted. Across the continents, ecosystems are distinct and vibrant. Mammoths graze on frozen steppe. Woolly rhinoceroses move in slow herds, their thick coats keeping them warm. Cave lions, larger than the lions of today, prowl through European grasslands. Hyenas, wolves and bears follow, thriving in the cold. In Africa, elephants with straight tusks and towering giraffes roam alongside antelope. The richness of life reflects adaptation to an Earth where the climate changes with relentless pace. In such a world, the human story is only beginning. 300,000 years ago, Homo sapiens are appearing in Africa. Fossils from Jebel Irhoud in Morocco dated to this period show early traits of our species. They are not yet identical to us, but their faces, jaws, and skulls reveal kinship. Elsewhere, Homo heidelbergensis survives in parts of Africa and Eurasia, shaping tools from stone. In Europe, these populations are beginning the long transition into Neanderthals. Humanity in its many branches is present but fragile. Populations are small, scattered and dependent on shifting resources. Archaeological finds remind us of their ingenuity. Hand axes of Apulian tradition carefully flaked from stone are found across Africa and Europe. In some places, evidence of controlled fire appears: darkened soils, burned bones, and charcoal fragments. To master fire in a world of cold is to gain survival warmth and light in the dark. This too belongs to the Earth of 300,000 years ago. A lesser-known detail lies in sediments far inland seashells found hundreds of kilometers from any present coastline. These are not misplaced curiosities but evidence of ancient shorelines, reminders that water levels have risen and fallen many times before. To uncover such shells is to realize how dynamic the Earth's skin is and how different the planet has been. Yet, mysteries endure. How large were human populations then? Estimates vary, with some suggesting only a few 100,000 individuals across the entire world. Did they communicate with symbols or only with sound? Did they view the sky with wonder or with pragmatic attention to the seasons? These questions remain unanswered, suspended in the fragmentary evidence of fossils and tools. On a planetary scale, the Earth 300,000 years ago is a place of contrasts. The poles are frozen, but the equatorial belt is alive with forests and grasslands. Deserts expand and retreat, seas withdraw, and return species adapt or vanish. The rhythm is slow but relentless. It is a world in which the present continents are recognizable yet profoundly altered. To look upon it is to recognize our home, yet also to see a planet that feels other, as though belonging to a parallel history. And so the Earth turns locked in its cycles, carrying life through glacial breath and interglacial thaw. In this age, silence reigns across frozen plains. Winds carry dust high into the atmosphere. The nights are long and cold in northern lands where the aurora shimmers across skies unseen by human eyes. The planet is vast, indifferent, yet filled with potential. In these conditions, the foundations of humanity's long journey are quietly being laid. This is Earth 300,000 years ago, not only colder and stranger, but deeply alive, a stage awaiting the fragile steps of a species that has only just begun. The skies above this planet are never static. Over spans of tens of thousands of years, the tilt of the Earth, its wobble, and its distance from the Sun shift in steady, predictable rhythms. These orbital variations, known to science as Milankovitch cycles, are the unseen metronome of the Ice Age. Round 300,000 years ago, the world finds itself in a colder part of that rhythm. The tilt of the Earth, slightly less than today, softens the contrast between seasons. The eccentricity of the orbit, elongated more than in later times, stretches the journey around the Sun. The precession, a slow wobble of the axis, adds another subtle layer. Together, these patterns alter the distribution of sunlight across the globe. It is not that the Earth receives less light in total, but that it is spread differently across latitudes and seasons. Northern summers are cooler, not strong enough to melt away all the snow of winter. Ice accumulates, reflecting more sunlight, reinforcing the chill. The planet slides deeper into glacial cold. In Europe and North America, the expansion of ice is relentless. The ice sheets advance slowly a few meters each year, but over centuries they reshape landscapes entirely. Mountains are ground down by their weight. Valleys are carved into U-shapes, their slopes smoothed by flowing ice. Rocks carried within the frozen mass are dropped far from their origin, leaving behind boulders called erratics. In these frozen frontiers, little can survive. Yet to the south, the climate is different. In the Mediterranean, summers remain warm though drier. In Africa, monsoon patterns are altered by the northern ice weakening rainfall. Lakes shrink and rivers retreat. The Sahara expands, but not permanently. Over long cycles, it will transform into green landscapes again, only to dry once more. 300,000 years ago, it leans toward aridity, but patches of vegetation linger in sheltered basins. The shifting skies control not only ice and deserts, but the winds themselves. Dust storms sweep across North Africa, their fine particles carried thousands of kilometers. Ice cores from Antarctica capture traces of this dust locked in frozen layers that can be read like pages of an ancient book. Each layer is a year, each shift a clue. They tell us that glacial times are dusty times when the earth is drier, when vegetation is sparse, and when the winds carry the planet's dryness across continents. Over Asia, monsoons weaken as well. The Indian subcontinent receives less rain. Grasslands extend where dense forests once stood. Animals adapt, migrating with the seasons, following water wherever it appears. The story of climate is written in their paths. Large herbivores shape the land, grazing in cycles that mirror the rains. Predators follow them, their survival tied to this delicate chain of dependency. In South America, the Andes cast long shadows over ecosystems. Glaciers cling to the high peaks, feeding rivers that flow into valleys below. The Amazon basin, though still forested, is more fragmented, with patches of open woodland and savanna breaking its continuity. The skies above carry less rain than today, another consequence of orbital shifts. Australia, already dry, becomes drier still. Its interior supports vast deserts with water confined to seasonal rivers. Yet along the coasts, life is sustained by rainfall and marine resources. Marsupial megafauna unique to this isolated continent browse and graze in forms unseen elsewhere. Giant wombats, kangaroo ancestors larger than a man, marsupial lions that stalk them. These creatures belong to a world moulded by a sky whose cycles few beings can sense, though all must obey. Even the oceans move in rhythm with the skies. As ice builds on land, sea levels fall, exposing vast stretches of seabed. These new plains alter wind patterns, changing the way moisture moves. The shallows left behind create new breeding grounds for fish and birds. Along ancient coasts, fossils later reveal corals stranded high above modern seas, remnants of times when water was lower or higher. These corals are markers telling of a restless ocean that rises and falls in tune with celestial geometry. For early humans, such changes mean shifting opportunities. A valley once fertile may dry a river, once broad may narrow a grassland, may give way to scrub. Groups must adapt, moving with the climate. Populations are small, but mobility is constant. Survival depends on reading the signs of a changing world. The sky, whether consciously noted or not, dictates their paths. The complexity of these cycles remains one of science's quiet mysteries. We can model the tilt, the precession, and the eccentricity with precision. We can calculate the sunlight at each latitude thousands of years ago, yet questions remain about how these shifts translate into the exact patterns of rainfall, ice growth, and ecosystem change. Why does a small difference in summer sunlight create such vast ice sheets? Why do monsoons weaken or strengthen in ways not fully explained by orbital geometry alone? The answers lie in the interplay of oceans, atmosphere and land, a system so intricate that even today it defies complete prediction. What is clear is that the Earth's climate is not fixed. It breathes in rhythms far longer than human lifetimes. To live 300,000 years ago is to inhabit a world defined by these slow beat cycles, invisible yet omnipresent. Night after night the stars wheel across the sky, indifferent yet steady. The Milky Way glows over dark plains unpolluted by artificial light. For humans then the heavens must have been vast and immediate. The cycles shaping their world are silent, unmarked by their awareness, yet guiding the reins that sustain them, the herds they hunt and the landscapes they traverse. On the scale of the planet, the skies orchestrate an unending movement. Deserts spread grasslands, contract glaciers, advance oceans retreat. On the scale of the human, these changes are both slow and urgent. A child born in one valley may grow old in another as rivers shift and forests withdraw. Generations may pass before the true scale of the cycle is clear, yet its influence is felt in every migration, every adaptation, every fragile survival. This is the earth under shifting skies and wandering seasons. It is a world held in balance between ice and warmth, pulled by forces beyond sight. It is a reminder that the climate we take for granted is only a moment in a longer dance. And in this age, the dance moves toward cold, sculpting a planet where life bends, but endures, where the seeds of humanity's story are planted under a ski ruled by cycles as old as the earth itself. The oceans of 300,000 years ago are drawn back, their waters locked in ice far to the north and south. With sea levels lower by more than 60 meters in places, the outlines of the continents are altered beyond recognition, where modern coastlines mark a firm division between land and sea. In this time, the boundary shifts outward, revealing plains of sand, marsh and grass that extend for hundreds of kilometers. These submerged shelves, today hidden beneath waves, are exposed as landscapes of their own. Rivers meander across them, carving broad valleys through soft sediments, carrying nutrients toward the deeper seas. Herds of grazing animals cross these new territories, treating them as extensions of the continental heartland, rather than fragile margins. In Europe, the North Sea does not exist as a body of water, but as a vast plain stretching from Britain to Denmark. Archaeologists later call this Doggerland a drowned world that once supported forests, lakes, and human presence. 300,000 years ago it is dry, wind-blown, and alive with game. Bison, mammoths, and wild horses graze in herds while predators follow in their wake. It is a place of abundance, but also of impermanence, destined to vanish beneath the sea when the ice melts again. In Asia, the shelves of the South China Sea are exposed, linking mainland Southeast Asia with islands that will later be separated. Borneo, Java, and Sumatra are not isolated, but joined in a single landmass known as Sunda. Across shallow straits, animals move freely. Elephants, tigers, and orangutans wander in ranges far larger than their modern confines. To the south, the landmass of Sahul, present-day Australia and New Guinea, combined also expands with lower seas, though still separated by waters not easily crossed. These new geographies create corridors and barriers shaping the distribution of species, and in time the pathways of humans. Africa's coasts stretch farther outward, with the Red Sea narrower and the Gulf of Aden drawn back. Along the Mediterranean, broad deltas fan into what is now shallow sea. The Nile pushes its sediments into a coastline much farther north. Shores around Italy, Greece and Turkey are elongated, the Aegean more land than water. The Black Sea, cut off by lower seas, shrinks in volume, its basin partly dry. To inhabitants of the time, these changes are not remarkable, for they have never seen our version of the world. Yet to modern eyes they remind us of how fluid the Earth's outline is, how temporary the map of any age. Fossil shells found high on cliffs and inland plains bear silent witness. They tell of seas that once stood where grasslands now roll, of tides that reached far beyond their present limits. Each shell is a relic of vanished shorelines. Coral reefs, too, reveal the story stranded above the water by later changes preserved as stone terraces on tropical coasts. In the shallow basins left behind, lagoons and wetlands thrive. These environments are rich with bird-life, fish and amphibians feeding larger predators. They become vital resources for early humans who forage along the edges, gathering shellfish, hunting waterfowl and drinking from freshwater pools. The ocean's retreat exposes more than land. It alters climate itself. With less water covering the shelves, heat exchange between ocean and atmosphere changes, affecting rainfall and winds. Deserts grow larger, while monsoons shift in timing and strength. The global system is sensitive to coastlines, and the coastlines themselves are never fixed. Across the Pacific Islands are fewer in number, many small atolls not yet formed or submerged. The Great Ocean remains immense, but the stepping stones between lands are altered. Later, this will influence human migration routes, but for now it shapes the dispersal of birds and marine life. Whales and dolphins follow ancient paths along continental slopes, their migrations unchanged in essence, but flowing past coastlines that appear foreign to us. These altered shores create mysteries as well. Archaeological sites are often hidden beneath today's seas, erased by rising waters in later millennia. The evidence of early humans who once lived on these plains is lost, drowned beneath meters of salt water. We can only guess at the camp's hearths and stone tools that once dotted landscapes now invisible. The absence of this evidence leaves questions about how humans spread where they settled, and what environments they depended on. Did they follow the coasts exploiting the abundance of marine resources, or did they prefer the interior plains? Without the lost record of submerged lands, answers remain uncertain. On a planetary scale, the oceans breathe with the rhythm of ice. During glacial phases, waters retreat. During interglacials, they return, swallowing the shelves and redrawing the map. This rise and fall is slow on a human scale, but swift in geological terms, occurring over thousands of years. To see it in its entirety is to witness the planet's restlessness, the ceaseless shifting of boundaries. For animals, these shifts open and close pathways. Mammoths walk from Siberia to Alaska across a land bridge where the Bering Strait lies submerged. Reindeer and bison cross with them, creating herds that stretch unbroken across continents. In later times, humans too will follow, but 300,000 years ago the land is empty of people, a corridor of potential awaiting future footsteps. The lowered oceans also concentrate marine life in narrower basins. Fisheries thrive in compressed zones where nutrients are abundant. Coastal upwelling feeds great schools of fish, drawing seabirds and seals. Whales dive along the new continental edges, their calls resonating through colder waters. These ecological riches sustain predators both in the sea and on land, binding the fates of shorelines and inland plains. The detail that surprises is the sheer extent of land revealed. Around the globe, more than 10 million square kilometers of additional surface are exposed during glacial lows. This is land greater than the area of modern Europe and China combined. For humans and animals alike, it means expanded habitats and new routes. For the climate system, it means a planet less moderated by shallow seas. The mystery is how much of this land was used. Did humans at the time wander far across these plains, or did they remain near more stable water sources? Without direct evidence, we cannot know. But the potential is vast, and the silence of the drowned landscapes leaves only speculation. The retreat of the oceans is not merely a subtraction of water. It is a revelation of a hidden Earth, a reminder that the planet's surface is transient, that what seems permanent is only a phase. To live 300,000 years ago is to inhabit a world where the continents themselves are swollen, their shapes stretched outward into the sea. To look from a hilltop in Doggerland or Sunda would be to see horizons that today lie beneath waves, to watch herds cross plains that will later be lost. And though the people of the time cannot know the future, their lives are already shaped by the rise and fall of seas, a cycle that will continue long after them, binding the fate of Earth to the rhythm of its ice. Across the heart of Africa, 300,000 years ago, the land stretches in vast expanses of savanna. These are open grasslands broken by scattered acacia trees and ribboned by seasonal rivers. The climate here is cooler and somewhat drier than the Africa of today, yet the land is still fertile enough to sustain immense herds of animals. Elephants with straighter tusks than their modern relatives graze alongside long-necked giraffes. Antelope and wildebeest move in restless waves across the plains, shaping the grass with their migrations. Predators stalk them in silence. Lions larger than those of the present hyenas, with bone-crushing jaws, and packs of wild dogs that rely on endurance rather than speed. The African savannas of this time are teeming ecosystems, their abundance supporting not only animal life but also the earliest forms of our own species. Here Homo sapiens begins its story. Fossil remains from Jebel Irhoud in Morocco, dated to around 300,000 years ago, reveal early individuals whose faces resemble ours. Their brows are heavy, their skulls elongated, yet their features unmistakably foreshadow the modern human form. They live in small bands no larger than a few dozen, relying on cooperation to survive. Their tools shaped from stone display skill and planning. They use the levallois technique, preparing a core carefully before striking flakes of desired size and shape. Such tools are more efficient than the hand axes of earlier times, reflecting a shift toward greater sophistication. Life on the savanna demands adaptability. The rivers swell and shrink with seasonal rains, forcing humans and animals alike to follow the cycles of water. Lakes appear in wet years only to vanish into dry pans when rains fail. These fluctuations create both opportunities and dangers. Herds congregate at shrinking waterholes, offering food but also attracting predators. To hunt early humans must understand not only the movements of animals, but also the pulse of the landscape. Fire, when controlled, offers another advantage. Charred wood and burned bones in African sites from this period suggest that humans are mastering its use. Fire brings warmth in cool nights, protection from predators, and the ability to cook food, making it easier to digest and safer to consume. Around campfires, groups likely share not only food, but knowledge gestures, and perhaps the beginnings of symbolic thought. The detail that is less well known lies in the microfossils preserved in lake sediments. Grains of pollen trapped in mud tell of shifting vegetation. At times grasses dominate, at others shrubs expand. These tiny records confirm that the savanna is never static. It breathes with the climate. Such changes, subtle on the scale of a human life, shape the evolution of both animals and people. Yet mysteries remain. How widely spread were these early humans? The fossils from Morocco are one snapshot, but evidence from East and South Africa suggests populations across a wide range. Were these groups connected by movement and exchange, or isolated and distinct? Did they share ideas about tools and fire, or did innovations arise independently in separate bands? The answers are lost in the fragmentary record, leaving only speculation supported by scattered stones and bones. On a planetary scale, Africa is not isolated. Its climate is influenced by the ice sheets far to the north. When glaciers expand, rainfall patterns shift, weakening the African monsoon. Deserts encroach on grassland, shrinking the habitable zones. When glaciers retreat, rains return, lakes refill, and the savanna flourishes again. These swings drive cycles of expansion and contraction in human populations, shaping migration routes and opportunities. For animals too, these cycles dictate survival. Elephants move with the grass. Crocodiles retreat to shrinking rivers. Birds follow rains across continents, their migrations linking Africa to Europe and Asia. The savanna is a crossroads of life tied by invisible threads to climates half a world away. To walk the African savanna 300,000 years ago would be to experience a world both familiar and alien. The calls of birds fill the morning air. The rumble of elephants echoes across plains. The sight of a pride of lions sprawled beneath a tree is timeless. Yet the people on this landscape are not tourists or observers, but participants in its fabric. They hunt antelope with stone-tipped spears, they gather roots and fruits, they defend against predators. Their survival is precarious, yet their adaptability hints at a destiny that will carry them far beyond Africa. Along rivers like the Homo in Ethiopia, or the Rift Valley lakes, small groups make camp, their fires flickering against the night. They sleep lightly, for predators are never far. In the morning they scatter across the savanna, scanning for signs of game or edible plants. The rhythm of their days is set by the rhythm of the land, water, food, shelter, safety. The detail of their lives is lost, yet stone flakes and burned wood mark their presence. They are not yet artists, but perhaps seeds of symbolism stir. Ochre fragments at later sites suggest they may already recognize color's power, though meaning remains elusive. For now their world is pragmatic, shaped by immediate survival. Still, the savanna is a place of beginnings. It is here that Homo sapiens learns resilience. It is here that cooperation proves essential. And it is here that the species first faces the unpredictability of a planet in flux. To live 300,000 years ago on the African savanna is to be at once vulnerable and resourceful, bound to the land yet shaped by forces far beyond. On the scale of the planet, the savanna is a single biome among many. On the scale of humanity, it is the cradle of a species that will one day cross every environment the Earth offers. For now it is enough to endure its cycles, to follow its herds, to drink from its rivers, and to keep the fire alive through the long nights. This is Africa in its vastness, a land of grass, of predators, of survival, and of the first people who walk with faces we might almost recognize. It is not yet our world, but it is the foundation of it, a place where the story of humanity is inseparable from the rhythm of the savanna itself. Across the northern third of Africa lies a land we know today as barren desert, a vast sweep of dunes and stone, a place of heat and silence. Yet 300,000 years ago, the Sahara is not only desert, it is a shifting mosaic, alternating between dryness and surprising fertility. In this period, orbital cycles weaken the African monsoon, and the Sahara tends toward aridity, but patches of water and vegetation remain. Lakes dot the basins, rivers cut temporary paths, and oases offer respite from the surrounding sands. The Sahara of this age is less green than in later wet phases, but it is not lifeless. Herds of gazelle move along grassy corridors. Hippopotamuses wallow in shrinking lakes, reminders that water still flows. Crocodiles bask on muddy banks, a startling presence in what will one day be endless dunes. Birds migrate through following wetlands as waypoints. Even in dry times, the Sahara is more dynamic than a wasteland. It is a landscape of transitions, its identity rewritten every few millennia by the rhythm of rain and drought. Geological traces record these changes. Beneath modern dunes lie ancient riverbeds, some stretching for hundreds of kilometers, their courses now buried but once carrying fresh water. Sediments preserve shells of freshwater mollusks, silent proof of lakes long vanished. Rock shelters protect faded images painted by later humans, depicting giraffes, elephants, and cattle in places now hostile to such life. Though these artworks date to wetter periods far later than 300,000 years ago, they testify to the Sahara's capacity for transformation. Even at this earlier time, its shifting nature shapes the lives of animals and people alike. For Homo sapiens emerging in Africa, the Sahara is both barrier and bridge. In drier times, it expands into a formidable obstacle, cutting populations off from the Mediterranean and beyond. In wetter times, it contracts its rivers and grasslands, opening pathways toward the north. 300,000 years ago, with dryness, more prevalent movement across it is difficult, but not impossible. Groups may skirt along its edges, following rivers that connect to the Nile or hugging coastlines where resources are steadier. Archaeological evidence from later periods hints at these routes, though direct proof from this time is scarce, lost under shifting sands or erased by time. The Sahara embodies a paradox, both a harsh expanse and a land that occasionally nurtures. Its hidden lakes, replenished by groundwater or rare rains, provide lifelines to those who know their locations. Animals find them, and humans, learning from the movements of herds, follow. Camps near such water sources leave faint traces, scatters of stone flakes, fragments of bone and ashes from fires. Each remnant is fragile, but together they suggest a persistence of life where survival seems unlikely. The lesser-known detail lies in the Saharan dust itself. Even in dry phases, winds lift fine particles into the atmosphere, carrying them across oceans. These grains, traced in deep sea sediments thousands of kilometers away, show how the Sahara connects to the world at large. Dust from its surface fertilizes distant waters, feeding plankton blooms that sustain marine life. In this way, even as a dry expanse, the Sahara participates in the planet's cycles, exporting nutrients across boundaries. Yet mysteries remain. How often did humans venture into its heart during these dry intervals? Were there small refuges, hidden valleys, or perennial springs where isolated groups endured for generations? Genetic evidence hints at ancient population structures within Africa, but the geography of those divisions is blurred. The Sahara may have been one of the great separators, splitting groups that would later reconnect in wetter times. On a planetary scale, the Sahara's cycles are linked to the tilt and wobble of the Earth. When monsoons strengthen, rains sweep north, turning desert into savanna, filling lakes like the vast Paleo Lake Mega-Chad. When monsoons weaken, the greenery retreats, leaving sand and rock. This oscillation, repeating every 20,000 years or so, acts as a gatekeeper for human expansion. The Sahara is never simply empty. It is either corridor or wall, depending on the skies above. To stand in the Sahara 300,000 years ago is to witness stark contrasts. In one direction, dunes stretch toward the horizon, shifting under relentless wind. In another, a cluster of trees shades a pool where antelope drink. The air is dry, the sun fierce, yet life persists in pockets, resilient and determined. For early humans, these contrasts shape existence. They gather roots and tubers where vegetation survives. They fish in lakes during rare wet years. They hunt gazelle on grassy patches. The desert is not a place to settle, but to pass through, cautiously guided by knowledge passed down in memory and practice. The broader picture is of a continent in flux. To the south, savannas teem with game. To the north, Mediterranean coasts offer rich resources. Between them lies the Sahara, sometimes open, sometimes closed. Its role in human history is profound. It dictates the timing of migrations, the opportunities for connection, and the barriers to expansion. 300,000 years ago, its dry phase delays the spread of Homo sapiens beyond Africa, holding them within their cradle for longer. Yet this delay shapes their resilience. To endure the Sahara, even at its margins, is to adapt to scarcity, to read the land carefully, to move in rhythm with change. On the scale of the Earth, the Sahara's shifting face is but one element of a larger climate system, influenced by ice far away and by the tilt of the planet itself. On the scale of the human, it is a vast presence, daunting and mysterious, both obstacle and invitation. It is a place that challenges survival, yet also reminds us that no landscape is permanent, no boundary absolute. 300,000 years ago, the Sahara is already writing its long chapter in the story of humanity. It is not the endless desert we know today, nor the lush savanna of later times, but a land in transition caught between dryness and possibility. Its rivers run intermittently, its lakes shrink and expand, its sands shift with the wind. To cross it is to gamble with survival. To live at its edges is to balance on the line between abundance and scarcity. In this restless land, the earliest humans learn lessons that will echo through ages: that the earth is not fixed, that survival depends on movement, and that sometimes the harshest landscapes carry the greatest significance. Far to the north, beyond the Mediterranean and across the shifting plains of what is now Central Europe, lies a continent defined by cold forests, open grasslands, and the looming presence of ice. 300,000 years ago, Europe is a land of contrast shaped by advancing glaciers to the north and temperate refuges farther south. Where Scandinavia now stands, thick ice sheets press outward, smothering valleys and mountains alike. To the south, in what will one day be France, Germany and the Balkans, open landscapes stretch widely. Grasslands dominate, interspersed with patches of oak and pine, offering habitats for great beasts that no longer walk the earth. This is a Europe ruled by giants. Cave lions, larger than their modern African relatives, stalk the open steppe. They hunt in coordinated groups, targeting wild horses, bison, and young mammoths. Their dens, tucked into caves, leave behind bones that tell the story of their prey. Alongside them prowl cave hyenas, formidable scavengers, but also hunters in their own right, their jaws strong enough to crack the largest bones. They thrive in large clans, leaving accumulated remains in caves that thousands of centuries later are uncovered as fossil-rich sites. The European forests shelter bears of immense size. Cave bears weighing more than half a ton spend summers feeding on vegetation before retreating into caves for long winter hibernations. Their skeletons, often found in clusters, testify to the ancient rhythm of their lives and deaths. Wolves too are present, smaller than those of later ages, but already practicing the social hunting strategies that will serve them well for millennia. The megafauna of Europe is varied, and abundant woolly rhinoceroses graze beside mammoths. Elk with antlers spanning several meters move through woodland edges. Herds of steppe bison carve paths through the grass. The balance between predator and prey defines the continent, a delicate network of survival, forged in the crucible of cold. For humans, this is a challenging world. Homo heidelbergensis still occupies parts of Europe. At this time, their population scattered but persistent. They are robust, well adapted to the demands of a cooler climate. Their shelters range from caves to open-air camps where fires leave blackened traces in the soil. Their tools, often made with the Apulian tradition of hand axes and flakes, reveal an ability to shape stone with purpose. They hunt large game, though likely through ambush or scavenging rather than direct confrontation. Spears of wood sharpened and hardened by fire serve as weapons, some of the oldest examples of hunting technology known. Among their descendants will arise the Neanderthals, but at this moment they are still in transition, their features only beginning to diverge into the distinct forms that will later be recognized. The detail often overlooked is the presence of interglacial refuges. Even within an ice age, Europe is not uniformly frozen. Southern regions, including the Iberian Peninsula, Italy, and the Balkans, provide milder climates where plants and animals endure through colder periods. These refuges preserve genetic diversity, allowing species to recolonize northern lands when glaciers retreat. They also offer safe havens for human populations whose survival depends on access to wood, water, and game. The persistence of these refuges means that Europe, though harsh, is never completely barren. Yet mysteries linger. How continuous were human populations in these shifting environments? Did groups survive in isolation through the harshest glacial advances, or were they repeatedly replaced by waves of migration from the south? Fossil evidence is sparse, scattered across caves and river valleys. Each site offers fragments, a jaw here, a tool there, a hearth preserved in ash. Together they suggest presence, but the full story remains incomplete. On the scale of the planet, Europe is one frontier among many. The ice advancing from the north cools the global climate, influencing winds and rainfall across continents. The animals of the steppe adapted to cold are part of a larger biome that stretches from Western Europe across Asia, a continuous grassland supporting life on a continental scale. The predators of Europe share ancestry with those of Africa and Asia, moving across corridors opened by low sea levels. The continent is not isolated, but part of a network of ecosystems spanning thousands of kilometers. To imagine Europe in this time is to picture vast open spaces where herds darken the horizon, and predators move in silence through tall grasses. It is to hear the trumpeting of mammoths, the growls of lions echoing in the night, the steady crunch of snow underfoot during long winters. It is also to see the faint glow of firelight from a cave where a small band of humans huddles against the cold. Their survival is fragile, yet their resilience allows them to persist in a land where even giants struggle. The forests of southern Europe, though patchy, offer resources essential to life. Nuts, fruits, and roots supplement diets of hunted meat. Rivers swollen with glacial melt in spring provide fish and waterfowl. Valleys shelter from wind, offering more favorable microclimates. Humans use these landscapes strategically, moving with the seasons, exploiting resources as they become available. They are not yet numerous, but their presence is steady, their adaptations laying groundwork for future lineages. One little-known fact lies in the distribution of fossils. The remains of animals and humans in Europe are often found deep in caves, not always because they lived there, but sometimes because water and sediments carried bones inside over time. These natural traps preserve assemblages that mislead at first glance. Untangling natural deposition from deliberate human activity remains a challenge, a scientific puzzle that complicates reconstructions of ancient lives. Mysteries of behavior also persist. Did Homo heidelbergensis bury their dead as Neanderthals later would? Or are the bones we find simply accidents of geology? Did they share symbolic thought, or were they limited to practical survival? Such questions cannot be answered fully, yet they linger, shaping our view of these ancient Europeans. On the planetary scale, Europe represents both edge and refuge, a testing ground for life against the advance of ice. Its megafauna are spectacular but vulnerable, dependent on the balance of grass and forest that shifts with climate cycles. Its humans are adaptable but scarce, their survival tied to fire cooperation and the ability to read landscapes transformed by cold. 300,000 years ago, Europe is not the continent of cities and farms it will one day become. It is a wild frontier ruled by beasts scarred by glaciers and watched over by skies heavy with shifting seasons. To live here is to endure a constant negotiation with climate, a test of resilience against both nature's grandeur and its indifference. For the people who walk these lands, survival is possible, but only through patience, ingenuity, and the fragile bonds of their small communities. This is Europe's lost world, a place of giants, predators, and beginnings, where the story of humankind unfolds quietly in the shadows of ice and forest. Across Africa and Eurasia 300,000 years ago, a species walks the land whose legacy is both direct and profound. These are Homo heidelbergensis, an ancient people whose bones reveal strength and adaptability. They are taller and more robust than the early Homo sapiens emerging in Africa, with large brow ridges, broad chests, and powerful limbs. Their skulls show a mix of features more advanced than Homo erectus, yet not fully Neanderthal or human in the modern sense. They're a pivotal branch in the human family bridging past and future. Their range is vast, extending from Africa into Europe and deep into Western Asia. Fossils in places like Bodo in Ethiopia, Petralona in Greece, and Steinheim in Germany trace their presence across continents. Each site offers fragment skulls with thick bone jaws with worn teeth, stone tools scattered nearby. These traces suggest a species capable of thriving in diverse environments, from the savannas of Africa to the colder forests of Europe. Their adaptability is their hallmark. They shape Acheulean hand axes with practiced skill, crafting symmetrical tools from large flakes. In some regions, they begin to experiment with more advanced techniques like the prepared core method, foreshadowing the Levallois technology that will become widespread. They use wooden spears hardened by fire as seen in remarkable finds at Schöningen in Germany, where 8 carefully crafted throwing spears were preserved in ancient lakeside sediments. These spears, balanced and sharpened, indicate planned hunting rather than mere scavenging. Such artifacts reveal a sophistication in both design and use a step toward the deliberate strategies of later humans. Life for Homo heidelbergensis is structured around small groups. Camps are temporarily established near rivers, lakes, or hunting grounds. Fires burn at the center, providing warmth protection and a place for cooking. Bones from sites show patterns of butchery cut marks where meat was stripped. Breakage for marrow extraction. These details tell of people skilled in using animals, fully wasting little, in a world where resources cannot be squandered. Their diets are varied, reflecting environments. In Africa, they consume antelope, hippos, and fish. In Europe, they hunt horses, deer, and perhaps young mammoths. Plants supplement their meals, roots, nuts, and seeds gathered seasonally. They are opportunists capable of adjusting to what the land offers. The lesser-known detail lies in their teeth, where patterns suggest not only heavy chewing but also use as tools gripping hides or fibers. Microscopic analysis reveals traces of grit hinting at plant processing or accidental inclusion of soil in meals. Such subtle evidence provides glimpses into behaviors invisible in stone or bone. Yet mysteries surround Homo heidelbergensis. Did they have language beyond basic calls and gestures? Their brains are large, nearly as big as ours, suggesting potential for complex thought. But no clear evidence of symbolic expression exists. No carvings, no paintings, no ornaments. Their world seems practical, not symbolic, though absence of evidence does not prove absence of capacity. Another question lingers over their fate. In Africa, they give rise to Homo sapiens. In Europe, they evolve into Neanderthals. In Asia, they may contribute to Denisovans, a population known only from fragments of bone and DNA. They do not vanish entirely. Rather, they divide into branches that will continue the human story. This branching is one of the pivotal mysteries of evolution. Why did some lineages survive while others disappeared? On the planetary scale, Homo heidelbergensis embodies humanity's expanding reach. They occupy lands from equatorial Africa to temperate Europe, adapting to savannas, forests, and steppes. They learn to endure both drought and cold. Their distribution reflects the mobility of early humans spreading across thousands of kilometers without modern tools, guided by water, prey, and climate. Their presence also shapes ecosystems. As hunters, they influence populations of large animals. Their fires alter landscapes, clearing brush and encouraging grasses. Their butchery scatters bones that feed scavengers. In subtle ways, they begin to transform environments, setting precedents for the deeper changes humanity will later impose. To imagine their daily life is to picture a group gathered near a lake at dusk. Children play with stones mimicking tool-making. Adults sharpen spears, prepare hides, and roast meat over flames. Smoke rises into the evening sky, carrying with it scents of wood and flesh. Nearby predators circle at a distance, wary of firelight. The people sleep lightly alert to danger bound by cooperation. Survival depends not on strength alone, but on shared vigilance. A lesser-known fact is their likely control of space within camps. Some archaeological sites reveal hearths placed in patterns suggesting an awareness of organization areas for fire, for tool-making, for sleeping. This division hints at social rules unwritten, but observe that structure life in small groups. Such organization is a precursor to the more complex social worlds of later humans. Yet there is no certainty. Much of their behavior is inferred from fragments, leaving mysteries unresolved. Did they care for their sick and injured as Neanderthals later did? Some skeletons show healed injuries suggesting support from companions. But how common was such care? Did they migrate seasonally or remain in favoured territories year-round? The evidence points in many directions, offering possibilities but few definitive answers. On a planetary scale, their significance is immense. Homo heidelbergensis is the root from which multiple lineages emerge. They are not merely a transitional species, but a branching point, a hub in the web of human evolution. Their survival across climates proves the flexibility of the genus Homo. Their innovations in tools and hunting demonstrate the capacity to adapt actively, not passively, to environment. They embody the resilience and creativity that define humanity, even in its early forms. To walk with them 300,000 years ago is to see people both familiar and strange. Their faces are heavy-browed, their voices unknown, yet their hands shape tools with skill, their fires burn against the night, their spears strike with purpose. They stand on the threshold of futures they cannot foresee, but we looking back recognize their importance. They are our kin, both ancestors and cousins, their legacy, written into the bones and genomes of later generations. This is Homo heidelbergensis, the bridge between worlds, the foundation upon which both Homo sapiens and Neanderthals will build. Their story is not one of extinction, but of transformation, a reminder that evolution is not a ladder, but a branching tree, its roots deep, its branches spreading in many directions. 300,000 years ago they walk the earth in small groups carrying fire tools and knowledge. They leave behind stone, bone and mystery, and in their quiet persistence they shape the course of what humanity will become. In the forests and steppes of Ice Age Europe, the long shadow of Homo heidelbergensis begins to give way to something new. Around 300,000 years ago, populations of this robust species living in colder latitudes begin to evolve distinctive traits that mark the dawn of the Neanderthals. It is not an abrupt change, but a gradual accumulation of features: thicker brow ridges, broader noses adapted to cold and stockier builds that conserve heat more effectively. These early Neanderthals, or pre-Neanderthals as some scientists call them, take shape in caves and valleys of Central and Southern Europe, shaped by the relentless climate of glacial cycles. Their bones, found in sites such as Cima de los Huesos in Spain, show clues to this transition. Dozens of individuals preserved deep in a cave shaft reveal heavy skulls with traits foreshadowing later Neanderthals. The discovery is both rich and puzzling, for the remains appear to have been placed deliberately, raising questions about behavior and intention. Were they deposited in ritual or simply as a practical means of disposal? The answer remains uncertain, one of the enduring mysteries of human prehistory. These early Neanderthals live in environments defined by extremes. In northern Europe, advancing ice sheets carve valleys and limit habitable zones. Winters are long and cold, summers short and mild. Food sources fluctuate, requiring resilience. In southern refuges, forests offer more stability, but even there the climate shifts between warmth and chill. Such conditions favour adaptation, and the bodies of Neanderthals reflect it. Shorter limbs reduce heat loss. Large nasal passages warm and moisten cold air. Robust skeletons endure the demands of constant physical effort. Their tools, though rooted in earlier Acheulean traditions, begin to show refinement. They fashion flakes from prepared cores, a technique that allows greater control over shape and sharpness. This Levallois method, not yet perfected but emerging, will become a hallmark of Neanderthal technology. Wooden spears hardened in fire remain part of their arsenal, suggesting hunts that are deliberate and coordinated. Herd animals such as horses, deer and bison provide sustenance, but require cooperation to bring down. Archaeological sites reveal butchery marks on bones, evidence that large prey was processed carefully with meat stripped and marrow extracted. The lesser-known detail lies in their teeth. Early Neanderthal fossils show unusual wear patterns consistent with using teeth as tools to grip hides or soften fibers. This hints at a way of life where the body itself becomes an instrument adapted not only through evolution, but through practice. It also suggests a level of versatility that goes beyond simple hunting. Yet mysteries surround these early Neanderthals. Did they possess symbolic thought, or was their world purely practical? The Cima de los Huesos site tempts speculation. Were the bodies placed in the cave with intention or merely by accident of geology? No carvings, no pigments, no ornaments accompany them, leaving ambiguity. Their behaviour sits on the edge of modernity, close enough to raise questions, distant enough to resist clear answers. On the planetary scale, the rise of early Neanderthals is part of humanity's wider branching. While Homo sapiens emerges in Africa and Homo heidelbergensis persists in other regions, Europe becomes the crucible for this distinct lineage. Isolation by distance and climate fosters divergence, shaping a population adapted to cold, destined to thrive in Ice Age Europe for hundreds of thousands of years. Their presence influences ecosystems. As apex hunters, they affect prey populations, altering migration routes of herbivores. Their fires change local vegetation, clearing undergrowth and encouraging grass. Their stone tools scatter across landscapes, leaving signatures of their passage. They are part of the balance of Europe, neither dominating nor absent, but integrated into its rhythms. To picture an early Neanderthal camp is to imagine a group sheltering in a cave entrance, as winds sweep across a glacial plain. Fire flickers against stone walls, casting shadows of figures busy with tasks. Some sharpen flakes of flint, others strip meat from bones. Children imitate the motions, learning through watching. Outside, the muffled sounds of animals drift on the cold air. Survival depends on cooperation, vigilance, and skill. The detail often overlooked is the evidence of injury and survival. Some early Neanderthal skeletons show healed fractures, suggesting that groups cared for their wounded. A broken bone that mends implies assistance, food, and protection during recovery. Such care hints at social bonds beyond immediate utility, an early sign of empathy. Yet the scope of their social world remains unclear. Did they form extended networks or remain isolated in small bands? Genetic evidence suggests low diversity, indicating small, closely related groups. But how often did they encounter others? Were exchanges of mates or tools common or rare? The answers lie hidden in DNA and sparse fossils, fragments of a larger picture not yet complete. On a planetary scale, these early Neanderthals remind us that human evolution is not linear. They are not failures, but survivors of their own path adapted to their environment with remarkable effectiveness. For hundreds of millennia, they will endure conditions that test resilience, living in landscapes where glaciers expand and retreat like slow tides. Their story is not one of decline, but of persistence, until their eventual absorption and disappearance long after. To imagine Europe 300,000 years ago with early Neanderthals is to see people both alien and familiar. Their bodies are powerful, their tools sharp, their fires warm. Their faces reconstructed from bones show heavy brows and broad noses, yet their expressions could be mistaken for thoughtfulness, for watchfulness, for the quiet concentration of survival. They are our cousins, their lineage parallel to ours, their fate intertwined though separate. In the caves of Spain, in the valleys of France, in the plains of Germany, they begin their long occupation. The ice will come and go, but they will remain shaping their lives to each shift. Their presence is a reminder that humanity is not a single path, but a branching tree, each branch adapting, persisting, and eventually fading or merging. 300,000 years ago, in the shadow of glaciers and forests, early Neanderthals begin their journey. They are not yet the full Neanderthals of later times, but the outlines are clear. They are a people shaped by cold, by cooperation, and by necessity. Their fires flicker against cave walls, their tools chip sparks from stone, their eyes watch the frozen plains. They are part of the Earth's story, bound to the cycles of climate and evolution, carriers of knowledge, written not in words, but in survival. In the landscapes of North Africa, 300,000 years ago, a remarkable transformation is underway. Among the scattered groups of hominins who have long called the savannas and river valleys, their home a new form emerges, Homo sapiens. The earliest known fossils from Jebel Irhoud in Morocco date to this period, showing a face strikingly familiar to us. The brow ridges are less massive than those of Homo heidelbergensis, the jaws lighter, the skull more rounded. Though not yet identical to modern humans, these early sapiens carry unmistakable signs of our lineage. Their appearance marks a profound moment, the dawn of our species on Earth. The environment in which they arise is both harsh and abundant. The climate fluctuates with glacial rhythms alternating between wetter and drier phases, shaping habitats that humans must constantly adapt to. Grassland, scrub, and sparse woodland stretch across much of northern Africa. Rivers swell during rainy intervals, feeding lakes that attract herds of gazelle, hartebeest, and aurochs. Predators, lions, leopards, hyenas prowl the margins, keeping the balance of the ecosystem. In this setting, Homo sapiens learns to survive not only by strength but by ingenuity. Their tools demonstrate precision and planning. The levallois technique, evident in stone flakes from Jebel Irhoud and other African sites, reflects a deliberate process preparing a stone core, then striking it to release sharp, usable flakes. This method requires foresight, a mental blueprint of the desired result. It is a step beyond improvisation, evidence of cognition, that looks forward not merely to the present task but to what comes next. Fire is part of their world as well. Charcoal layers and burned bones suggest controlled use, perhaps more consistent than in earlier times. Fire allows cooking, which softens food and unlocks calories. It offers warmth in cool nights and protection against predators. Around campfires, small groups gather, their faces lit in flickering orange, sharing food, and perhaps gestures of meaning beyond simple necessity. The lesser-known detail is the evidence of ochre at sites in Africa from roughly this age. Ochre is a red mineral pigment ground and sometimes marked by scratches that suggest deliberate use. While it may have served practical functions such as hide preparation, it raises the possibility of symbolic behavior. Did these early humans use color to mark bodies or objects? If so, it would signal the dawn of abstraction, the ability to let materials carry meaning beyond function. Yet the mystery remains unresolved, for direct proof of symbolic thought is elusive. The population of Homo sapiens at this time is small, scattered across Africa, in groups of perhaps only dozens. Estimates suggest that the entire species numbers no more than a few 100,000 individuals. Such scarcity makes them vulnerable to environmental shifts, drought, or disease. But their adaptability grants resilience. When resources decline in one area, they move. When landscapes change, they find new strategies. This mobility is not random, but guided by knowledge of rivers, seasons, and animal migrations. Their lives are fragile, yet their persistence plants the seeds of global expansion to come. On the planetary scale, the emergence of Homo sapiens coincides with a world in flux. Ice sheets to the north expand and retreat in slow cycles, altering rainfall patterns across Africa. The Sahara swings between desert and savanna, opening and closing pathways of movement. These changes create pulses of opportunity, windows when humans can move beyond familiar ranges, perhaps reaching into the Middle East and beyond. Fossil and genetic evidence suggests that even in these early times, populations were not static. Genes flowed between groups, mixing and diversifying. The African continent, vast and varied, becomes the crucible in which humanity is forged. To imagine their daily life is to see a group encamped near a seasonal river. Their shelters are simple, perhaps windbreaks of branches or hides. Children play with small flakes of stone, learning by imitation. Adults prepare tools, scrape hides, and tend fires. At dawn, hunters set out with spears of sharpened wood, moving silently across the grass in pursuit of antelope. Their success is uncertain, but persistence and cooperation increase their chances. Gatherers return with roots, fruits, and seeds, contributions as vital as the hunt. The rhythm of their existence is one of movement, adaptation, and survival. A lesser-known fact lies in the wear on their teeth. Microscopic scratches suggest varied diets, from tough plant fibers to roasted meat. Such diversity reflects not only the environment, but the flexibility of Homo sapiens. This versatility, more than any single adaptation, defines their success. Yet mysteries surround their consciousness. Did they tell stories, sing, or imagine? The evidence is silent. But their tools and pigments hint at minds capable of more than immediate necessity. Perhaps they shared knowledge through language, though no direct trace remains. The shape of their vocal tract suggests possibility, but certainty is impossible. On the scale of human evolution, this moment is pivotal. The lineages of Heidelbergensis and Neanderthals represent side branches, but Homo sapiens is the branch that will spread across the globe. Their appearance does not erase others. Rather, it adds to the diversity of human forms coexisting on the planet. For tens of thousands of years, sapiens, Neanderthals, and other hominins will share the Earth, each adapting in its own way. On the scale of the Earth itself, they are insignificant in number, yet their potential is immense. They walk in small groups across savannas, but in their minds lies the capacity for future art, culture, and exploration. The beginnings are faint, but the trajectory is set. To stand in Morocco 300 millennia ago is to see faces that are at once ancient and familiar. Their eyes look out across plains dotted with gazelle. Their hands flake stone with practiced rhythm. Their fires glow against the dusk. They do not know they are the first of a species that will one day reshape the planet. They know only the immediacy of survival, the pull of hunger, the comfort of fire, and the bond of group. Yet from these beginnings the story of modern humanity begins. This is the first Homo sapiens born of Africa, adapted to flux, and poised, though they cannot know it, to inherit the earth. Stone and fire, two elements of the ancient world, shape the daily lives of humans 300,000 years ago. Stone provides the sharp edge, the cutting tool, the weapon for hunting and butchering. Fire provides heat protection and transformation. Together they form the foundations of culture, the technologies upon which survival depends. In this time, stone tools evolved from older Acheulean traditions into more complex methods. Acheulean hand axes, large teardrop-shaped tools crafted by Homo erectus and Homo heidelbergensis, remain in use, their forms honed through hundreds of thousands of years of practice. But alongside them appears the Levallois technique, a method that requires greater planning. A stone core is carefully shaped so that a single blow releases a flake of predetermined size and form. The process is deliberate, requiring an abstract image of the finished tool before it is struck. The flakes themselves become knives, scrapers, and spear tips sharper and more versatile than earlier implements. Archaeological sites across Africa and Europe preserve these flakes scattered like the footprints of thought. The adoption of Levallois marks a significant cognitive shift. It is evidence not only of skill but of foresight and ability to envision the future use of a tool and the steps needed to create it. This forward-looking capacity is one of the hallmarks of humanity. Fire too becomes more consistently controlled. While earlier hominins may have used natural flames from lightning strikes, evidence by this time suggests deliberate maintenance of hearths. Burned bones, charred wood, and layers of ash reveal repeated use. Fire changes everything. It extends the day, offering light into darkness. It transforms food, making meat easier to chew and digest, releasing more calories. It drives away predators whose eyes reflect uneasily in the flickering glow. It warms cold nights, allowing expansion into harsher climates. To gather around fire is to create a center, a focal point of social life. A lesser-known detail lies in the chemistry of bones found at hearth sites. Traces of controlled heating, consistent with sustained flames rather than brief burns, confirm that fires were tended, not accidental. These chemical signatures offer silent proof of deliberate practice, a skill passed through generations. The mysteries of fire remain. Did humans at this time know how to ignite flames from scratch, striking stones together, or spinning wood to spark embers? Or did they rely on capturing fire from natural sources, carrying embers and coals to keep it alive? The evidence is unclear. Some sites suggest mastery of ignition, while others hint at reliance on maintenance. In either case, fire is precious, treated as life itself, nurtured carefully, so it does not vanish into cold ashes. Stone and fire together enable hunting to reach new levels. Spears tipped with flaked stone penetrate hides more effectively than wooden points alone. Fire is used to drive animals, flushing them into ambush. With these tools, humans shift from opportunistic scavengers to active hunters capable of targeting larger prey. Archaeological evidence of butchered animals, cut marks on horse bones, shattered marrow-rich femurs confirms their success. On the savannas of Africa, they pursue gazelle and antelope. In Europe, they hunt deer, bison, and horses. Cooperation becomes essential, for large prey cannot be taken by individuals alone. The planet itself reflects these innovations. With tools and fire, humans expand into new regions, testing environments that would otherwise be inhospitable. Fire allows them to endure colder nights at higher altitudes. Tools allow them to process resources with greater efficiency. This spread of Levallois technology across Africa, Europe, and Asia signals networks of knowledge, ideas carried across distances by movement or exchange. This diffusion shows that human culture, even in its earliest forms, is not static but dynamic. To imagine a camp at this time is to see stones flaked near a fire's edge, their sharp fragments catching firelight. A hunter sharpens a spear tip with rhythmic strikes. Another tends the flames, feeding them with dry branches gathered from the landscape. Children watch, learning by imitation, their small hands turning pebbles as practice. The group shares roasted meat, passing pieces across the circle, smoke rising into the night sky. Around them darkness stretches vast, filled with the distant calls of animals. Within the circle of light they are safe, sustained by the dual gifts of stone and fire. The lesser-known fact is that stone flakes themselves hold secrets invisible to the eye. Microscopic traces of use residues of blood fat or plant fibers reveal what they cut. These residues confirm not only hunting, but processing of plants' hides and wood. The tools are multi-purpose, their versatility reflecting a flexible way of life. Fire too leaves traces beyond ashes. Soils altered by heat persist for millennia, recording hearths long after flames die. These details preserved in sediments allow modern science to reconstruct moments otherwise lost. Mysteries endure about the social meaning of fire. Was it merely practical, or did it carry symbolic weight? Did groups gather for warmth alone, or did firelight become a stage for communication? Perhaps even the first flickers of storytelling. No artifacts tell us yet, the possibilities are tantalizing. Around fire, humans could share memory, transmit knowledge, and imagine beyond the present. On the planetary scale, the mastery of stone and fire positions humans uniquely. Other animals use tools. Other species exploit natural fire, but none combine the two with such consistency and foresight. The Earth of 300,000 years ago is filled with powerful creatures, lions, mammoths, rhinoceroses, but none wield technology that transforms environments. Fire clears landscapes, encouraging grasses that attract game. Stone tools enable efficient hunting, altering the balance between predator and prey. Even at this early stage, humanity begins to leave a distinct mark. To walk into a cave of this time is to find blackened ceilings where smoke once rose, to step on layers of ash, compressed beneath feet, to uncover stone flakes scattered like echoes of thought. Each fragment is silent, but together they tell of a people who shape the world with elements both enduring and ephemeral. Stone lasts for millennia, fire vanishes in hours, yet both are bound into the human story. This is the age of fire and stone, a threshold in which survival is not left to chance alone, but shaped by knowledge, skill, and cooperation. 300,000 years ago, under shifting skies and across changing landscapes, humans wield these tools to carve out existence. They are fragile bands of hunters and gatherers, but their mastery of stone and fire makes them resilient, adaptable, and enduring. In these humble technologies lie the beginnings of culture, the sparks of what will one day become art, ritual, and civilization. But for now, they are simply the means of survival, the essentials of life carried from camp to camp, from fire to fire across a restless and changing earth. The landscapes of 300,000 years ago are never fixed. Forests expand and contract, rivers change course, and grasslands shift with each swing of climate. To live in this world is to inhabit an earth where stability is rare, and impermanence is the rule. Even in regions far from ice, the influence of glacial cycles is felt. Rainfall patterns shift as winds respond to cooler oceans and advancing ice sheets. A valley fertile for generations may dry within a century. A river wide enough to support herds may shrink into a trickle, forcing both animals and people to move. For early humans, such changes are not abstract trends, but immediate realities that dictate where food and water can be found. The forests of Africa and Eurasia provide striking examples of this instability. In wetter periods, woodland spreads with oak, pine, and birch anchoring soils and offering food in the form of nuts and fruit. In drier times, these same areas become grasslands or scrub less diverse, but supporting herds of grazing animals. The pollen grains preserved in lake sediments show these shifts with clarity, tiny records of expansion and retreat that reveal the restless pulse of climate. Such transformations shape the rhythms of animal life. Herds of mammoths and bison follow new grasslands, abandoning valleys where forests have grown too dense. Predators adapt, shifting their ranges to follow prey. Crocodiles vanish from rivers that dry, while hippos retreat to deeper waters when wetlands contract. For humans, these changes create both opportunity and challenge. A new grassland may provide easier hunting of herbivores, but it may also expose groups to harsher sun and fewer resources for shelter. To survive requires mobility and flexibility, the ability to move quickly when conditions demand. One lesser-known detail lies in the fossilized footprints preserved in ancient mud. In East Africa, sites reveal trails of humans and animals walking side by side along lake shores. These impressions hardened into stone are frozen moments of coexistence. They remind us that humans navigated landscapes in constant dialogue with other species, their movements intertwined. Yet mysteries remain. How did early humans track these environmental shifts? Did they anticipate them by observing skies and seasons, or did they simply respond after scarcity set in? Without writing or records, their knowledge is invisible to us, but their persistence suggests a capacity to read subtle signs, the behavior of animals, the flowering of plants, the flow of rivers. Such observational skills may have been as vital as tools or fire. On a planetary scale, these transformations reflect the interconnectedness of climate systems. Ice advancing in Europe alters winds in Africa, shifting monsoons and reshaping the Sahara. Volcanoes erupt, sending ash into the sky, dimming sunlight and altering rainfall. Oceans cool or warm with subtle shifts in current, their influence carried across continents. The Earth is a web of feedbacks where a change in one region resonates far beyond. To imagine such transformations is to picture a world in motion. A savanna where humans once hunted antelope may within a few generations become woodland alive with birdsong and shaded rivers. Conversely, a lush forest may fade into scrub, forcing humans to leave behind campsites they had long relied on. The planet does not accommodate permanence. It demands adaptation. Archaeological sites reflect this impermanence. Layers of occupation appear and vanish. Hearths built and abandoned stoneflakes scattered and buried. The record is patchy because human presence itself is patchy, tied to resources that shift with the land. Where rivers run steady, evidence accumulates. Where they vanish, silence follows. The detail often overlooked is the role of wetlands. These transitional zones, neither fully land nor water, are critical resources. They provide fish, birds, and reeds for tools and shelter. They are also fragile, vanishing quickly when rains fail. For humans, wetlands are both lifelines and uncertainties, places of abundance one year and absence the next. Mysteries also persist about the pace of these changes. Geological records show broad trends, but the lived experience of humans is more immediate. Did families witness lakes drying in a single lifetime, or were shifts so gradual that they seemed part of the natural order? Some transitions were swift, driven by abrupt climate events. Others unfolded slowly, imperceptible in the span of a human life, but transformative across centuries. On the scale of humanity, the lesson is resilience. Groups learn to move lightly on the land, carrying what they need, building what they can abandon, never rooted too deeply in a world that does not stay the same. Their survival strategies reflect an understanding, whether conscious or instinctive, that the Earth is change itself. On the planetary scale, this dynamism is part of the rhythm of glacial cycles. Earth's orbit tilts, precesses, and shifts, redistributing sunlight and triggering cascades of change. Grasslands spread, then retreat. Deserts expand, then contract. Seas rise, then fall. The world of 300,000 years ago is not only colder but more volatile than ours, a place where uncertainty is the background condition of existence. To stand on a hillside in that time is to look across a landscape that will not be the same for long. Rivers glitter in the distance, their courses destined to shift. Forests edge outward only to recede again. The people who walk this land know it not as stability but as flux, their memories layered with stories of places gained and lost. They may not record these shifts in words, but they live them carrying knowledge through practice and tradition. This is the essence of their survival. The lesser-known fact is that even animals leave traces of adaptation in their bones. Changes in the isotopes of fossilized teeth reveal diets that fluctuate with vegetation. Mammoths that once fed on grasses may turn to shrubs when climates shift. Such evidence confirms that life at every level responds to the instability of the land. Mysteries of migration linger as well. Did humans follow herds deliberately across shifting biomes, or did they move independently, converging only when conditions aligned? The archaeological record shows overlaps of species and humans, but it cannot always reveal intention. The patterns remain complex, a tapestry only partly understood. On the planetary scale, the restless Earth is a stage of transformations, a world where permanence is illusion. On the human scale, it is both hardship and opportunity, demanding constant attention and adaptation. For those who lived, then survival was not a matter of conquering the land, but of listening to it, moving with it, accepting its impermanence. 300,000 years ago, the world was a place of constant becoming. Lakes appeared and disappeared, forests spread and shrank, deserts waxed and waned. To live within it was to be part of this pulse, to carry firestone and memory into each new landscape, to find life where yesterday there was none, and to leave behind traces where tomorrow will erase them. This was a world of worlds within worlds, an Earth always shifting, always new and never entirely the same. Across the continents 300,000 years ago, the groups of humans who inhabit the Earth are small, scattered and fragile. Each band numbers only a few dozen, tied together by kinship and necessity. Their survival depends not on dominance but on cooperation, not on permanence but on mobility. They live in a world filled with predators larger and stronger than themselves, in landscapes that change with seasons and with longer cycles of climate. In such a setting, every decision where to camp, when to move, what to hunt can determine survival. These groups rely on each other for protection. A lone human on the savanna or in the steppe would be vulnerable, but together they can watch for danger, defend fires, and track game. The bonds within the group are intimate, forged by shared hardship. Food is distributed, children are cared for collectively, and the injured may be supported until they recover. Archaeological evidence of healed bones confirms this. Individuals with injuries severe enough to prevent self-sufficiency survived long enough for healing proof of social care. This suggests that even in such ancient times, humans understood that the strength of the group outweighed the strength of the individual. Their movements are guided by water. Rivers, lakes, and seasonal streams dictate migration routes. In wet years, resources spread wide. In dry years, life contracts to a few critical refuges. Campsites cluster near these sources, marked by hearths, stone flakes, and bones. When the water shifts, the people shift. The earth itself compels mobility. A lesser-known detail lies in the evidence of temporary shelters. Impressions in sediments, post holes, and arrangements of stones hint that humans built windbreaks, or simple structures of wood and hides. These are not permanent dwellings, but adaptable shelters erected quickly and abandoned without regret. The impermanence of their homes mirrors the impermanence of their landscapes. Yet mysteries remain about their social worlds. How large were their territories? Did they meet neighbouring groups, often exchanging mates or tools, or did they remain isolated for generations? Genetic studies suggest both isolation and contact, a mosaic of interactions shaped by climate and geography. The exact patterns are lost to time, leaving only questions about the extent of their social networks. On a planetary scale, these fragile bands represent only a thin thread of life woven into vast ecosystems. They are neither dominant nor central in their age. Mammoths shape grasslands through grazing. Lions and hyenas define predator-prey dynamics. Rivers carve valleys, ice advances and retreats, deserts shift in rhythm with the skies. Humans are part of this web, not yet its masters. Their numbers are so small that the extinction of a single band would barely register on the scale of the Earth. Yet within these small groups lies the potential for resilience beyond measure. Their tools are modest but effective. Spears, flakes, and scrapers allow them to hunt, butcher, and process hides. Fire gives them warmth, light, and safety. Their knowledge, carried in memory and practice, is transmitted from one generation to the next. Children learn by watching elders copying the strikes of stone, the tending of fire, the reading of tracks in the dust. This transmission of skill is the inheritance that sustains survival. To imagine their lives is to picture a camp at the edge of a river, smoke curling into the dusk. A group sits in the glow of fire chewing roasted meat, while others scrape hides into usable leather. The night is filled with sounds, the distant roar of lions, the calls of nocturnal birds, the rustling of wind in grass. Sleep comes in shifts, with some staying awake to guard. The group is small, the world around vast and indifferent, but within the circle of firelight there is warmth, community and continuity. The detail often overlooked is how vulnerable they are to fluctuations. A failed hunt, a dry season, or a sudden illness can threaten the group. Infant mortality is high, lifespans short. Yet despite these risks, the species endures, finding ways to adapt to each new challenge. Their resilience lies not in numbers, but in flexibility, in the ability to adjust to shifting conditions and to carry knowledge across generations. Mysteries also linger about their inner lives. Did they feel the bonds of kinship as love or only as necessity? Did they grieve for their dead or move on without ceremony? Fossil evidence cannot answer, but hints of care for the injured and placement of bodies in caves suggest emotions that echo those of later humans. The scale of their communities, small and precarious, amplifies each life and each loss. On the planetary scale, their survival is remarkable. They persist across Africa, Europe, and parts of Asia despite ice drought and predators. They adapt not by altering the planet, but by altering themselves through movement, cooperation, and ingenuity. Their fragility is real, yet it conceals strength. Small groups are more mobile, less tied to specific landscapes, able to shift when the Earth demands it. Their vulnerability is balanced by adaptability. To walk among them is to see faces both strange and familiar, to hear voices that carry across plains, to witness the small triumphs of daily life, a successful hunt, a fire rekindled, a shelter secured. Their world is filled with uncertainty, but also with persistence. They endure because they can bend with change, not resist it. The lesser-known fact is how wide their ranges may have been. Even small groups likely covered territories of hundreds of kilometers over the course of years, moving between seasonal resources. This mobility, though necessary for survival, also spreads ideas and tools, ensuring that knowledge does not remain confined to one valley, but circulates across regions. The mysteries of these fragile bands remind us that survival is not guaranteed. At any moment they could have disappeared, leaving only traces in sediments and bones. Yet they did not. Their persistence against all odds ensured that the lineages of Homo sapiens, Neanderthals, and other humans continued. On the planetary scale, their presence is barely visible, a thin thread in the fabric of life. On the human scale, their resilience is profound, for without their fragile endurance, the story of humanity would not have unfolded. 300,000 years ago, the Earth is filled with dangers, instability, and change. In this setting, small human groups survive by moving lightly, by sharing, by caring, and by adapting. Their lives are precarious, their numbers few, but their resilience carries forward. This is the rhythm of fragile bands, vulnerable yet enduring, the quiet persistence of humanity at its dawn. Among the scattered traces of humanity 300,000 years ago, faint signs emerge that survival was not only practical, but also touched by something more. Tools and fire ensured safety and sustenance, yet evidence hints at early gestures towards symbol and meaning. These are not yet the elaborate cave paintings or carved figures of later millennia, but subtle markers that suggest minds beginning to move beyond immediate necessity. One of the clearest clues comes from fragments of ochre-red iron-rich mineral collected and sometimes shaped by human hands. At sites in Africa, pieces of ochre show grinding and scraping as if pigment was prepared. While it could have been used to soften hides, the presence of carefully selected colours raises the possibility of symbolic use perhaps for body marking or for tinting objects. If so, it reflects an abstract leap using material not for function, but for representation. The ochre itself carries no answers, only potential. Alongside pigment, other discoveries raise questions. Shells pierced with small holes found at later sites suggest adornment. Whether strung as necklaces or carried as tokens, they reveal an impulse to decorate or signify. Although direct evidence from 300,000 years ago is sparse, the earliest sapiens who appear in Morocco and elsewhere may already have begun to explore such symbolic dimensions. Their tools demonstrate planning, their fire reveals control, and their pigments hint at imagination. The lesser-known detail lies in cut marks on bones that seem unnecessary for butchery, perhaps deliberate incisions with no practical purpose. Such marks, though ambiguous, suggest curiosity about form or habit of engraving surfaces, gestures that carry no immediate survival advantage. These are the seeds of art too faint to be certain, but too suggestive to ignore. Mysteries remain vast. Did early humans share stories by firelight using gesture and sound to recount hunts, dangers or dreams? Did they attach meaning to the stars overhead or to the shapes of animals they hunted? No evidence survives of speech or narrative, yet the cognitive abilities required for advanced tool-making and planning hint at the possibility. The absence of proof does not erase the chance that symbolic thought already stirred. On a planetary scale, these first symbols represent an immense threshold. Life on Earth had thrived for billions of years, but only now do marks appear that may have carried meaning beyond utility. If ochre was indeed used to mark bodies, it may have defined identity within a group, distinguishing members by colour or design. Such expression, though modest, signals an awareness of self within a collective, an ability to shape social bonds through symbol rather than force. To imagine such a moment is to picture a group seated near a fire, a piece of ochre passed from hand to hand. One individual scrapes it on stone, creating red dust. Fingers smear the colour on skin or object. Children watch, intrigued by the transformation. The firelight makes the pigment glow, giving it presence beyond its substance. Whether practical or symbolic, the act carries significance. It shows humans altering not just tools, but appearances, adding layers to their world. The detail often overlooked is how such early experiments with symbol connect to later traditions. Tens of thousands of years later, caves will bloom with paintings of animals and handprints. Necklaces of shells and beads will adorn the dead. These later achievements did not arise suddenly, but from foundations laid slowly across countless generations. The ochre the cut marks the pierced shells, are whispers of that trajectory, faint but persistent. Mysteries endure about language. Could Homo sapiens of this time speak in structured sentences, or were their communications limited to calls, gestures, and sounds? Their anatomy suggests capacity for speech, but proof is absent. If language existed even in rudimentary form, it would have provided the scaffolding for symbolism, allowing ideas to be shared, remembered, and expanded. Without words, symbols are limited. With words, they can travel, endure, and evolve. On the scale of daily life, such symbolic gestures may have strengthened bonds within small groups. Markings on skin could have signified belonging. Ochre might have been used in rituals connected to fire or death. The piercing of shells could have signaled status or memory. These gestures, even if rare, indicate that humans were beginning to think of themselves not only as individuals surviving in the present, but as beings connected to meaning, identity, and perhaps continuity. On the planetary scale, this shift is subtle yet profound. The Earth itself is indifferent, continuing its cycles of ice, desert, and forest. Mammoths graze, lions hunt, rivers rise and fall. Yet in scattered bands of humans, pigments are ground, marks are made, and objects are chosen for beauty as well as utility. These acts are small, but they signal a new relationship between mind and world, one in which meaning is layered upon material. To imagine their inner lives is difficult. Did they feel awe at the colours of ochre joy, at adornment reverence for marks carved into bone? Did they see symbols as connecting them to animals, ancestors, or unseen forces, or were these simply curiosities, gestures without deeper significance we cannot know? The record is too fragmentary. Yet the persistence of pigments and pierced objects across regions and times suggests continuity, not accident. The lesser-known fact is that ochre persists in human history across astonishing spans from these earliest hints to the painted caves of tens of millennia later. This continuity suggests not only practical use, but cultural weight carried through ages as part of what it meant to be human. Mysteries also remain about the universality of such behaviours. Were they widespread among all groups or limited to a few populations? Did ochre and adornment spread through contact or arise independently in separate places? The evidence hints at both possibilities, underscoring the diversity of human experience even at this early time. On the scale of humanity, the emergence of symbol is as important as the mastery of stone or fire. It represents the expansion of the human mind into realms of meaning. On the scale of the earth, it is invisible, leaving only faint traces in sediments and caves. Yet in the long story of life, it marks a threshold unique to our species, the capacity to imagine beyond necessity, to create symbols that bind, express, and endure. 300,000 years ago, humanity begins this quiet revolution. The evidence is fragmentary, the gestures subtle, the meanings lost. But within ochre cut marks and shells lies the earliest hint of what will become art, ritual, and culture. These fragile beginnings, though uncertain, carry forward through generations, shaping the human story. This is the dawn of symbols, a moment when survival alone no longer defines humanity, when meaning begins to take form alongside fire and stone. It is the beginning of expression, faint but enduring, written not in words but in the quiet traces left behind in earth and bone. At the northern edge of Europe, 300,000 years ago, the land lies beneath vast expanses of ice. Glaciers press southward, kilometers thick their weight, reshaping valleys and crushing forests. The frozen sheets grind mountains into rounded forms, carry boulders far from their origins, and leave moraines that mark the limit of their advance. Where the ice meets open ground, rivers of meltwater carve braided channels, cold and turbulent feeding lakes that rise and fall with the seasons. This frozen frontier is inhospitable to humans, yet its influence stretches across the continent, altering climate and reshaping ecosystems. The regions south of the ice are tundra and steppe windswept plains, where grasses dominate and trees are scarce. These open lands support herds of mammoths, woolly rhinoceroses and reindeer. Predators follow in their wake, cave lions, hyenas and wolves, all adapted to cold. Farther south, in more temperate refuges, oak and pine forests persist, offering resources to both animals and humans. The ice, though distant, determines the boundaries of life. For the humans of this age, the frozen north remains largely inaccessible, but the presence of early Neanderthals in Central and Southern Europe indicates that they adapt to the shifting edge of the ice, hunting in the steppe, sheltering in caves, and following herds. Fossil remains suggest they are robust and well suited to cold, their stocky builds conserving heat, their tools crafted to process tough hides and meat. Yet northward, beyond their reach, lies a world erased by ice. The lesser-known detail lies in what the glaciers conceal. Beneath the ice sheets, landscapes are buried for millennia only to be revealed when the ice retreats. Forests, rivers, and entire ecosystems vanish under frozen mass, their histories sealed away. When the ice melts, it leaves behind fresh soils, fertile plains and lakes that reflect the sky. These cycles of burial and revelation shape the geography of Europe repeatedly, each advance of ice erasing and remaking. Mysteries endure about human presence at the ice's edge. Did small groups venture into tundra zones to hunt reindeer or mammoths? Or did they remain closer to forests and rivers? The archaeological record is sparse, for many traces of occupation have been destroyed by advancing glaciers or drowned by later meltwaters. The absence of evidence leaves questions: how far north did humans travel, and how did they adapt to the harshest climates? On the planetary scale, these ice sheets are more than regional features. They reflect sunlight, cooling the globe further. Their formation lowers sea levels, exposing continental shelves and altering coastlines thousands of kilometers away. Winds shift around them, carrying dust from dry lands to distant oceans. The frozen north is thus connected to deserts in Africa, monsoons in Asia, and rainfall in the Americas. The Earth is a single system, and the glaciers of Europe are one of its dominant forces. To imagine standing at the edge of such ice is to see a wall of white stretching to the horizon, creaking and groaning as it shifts. The air is sharp with cold, the landscape quiet except for the rush of meltwater. Animals approach the margin, cautiously drinking from streams before retreating to warmer plains. Humans, if present, stay at a distance, their fires small and fragile against the immensity of frozen mass. The detail often overlooked is the effect of ice on migration routes. Valleys blocked by glaciers force animals and humans alike to find new paths. Mountain passes are closed, rivers rerouted. These changes create bottlenecks, concentrating life in corridors where resources are both abundant and contested. For humans, these corridors may have been both opportunities and dangers, places where herds were easier to find, but predators also gathered. Mysteries also surround the fate of those who lived at the margins of ice. Did groups retreat southward when glaciers advanced, abandoning territories, or did they endure, finding ways to survive in tundra environments? Genetic evidence suggests population shifts, but the details remain hidden. Some groups may have perished, others merged with newcomers. The frozen north remains a silent witness, preserving few answers. On the planetary scale, the presence of ice shapes not only climate, but also the long arc of human evolution. The challenges of cold demand innovation, better tools, warmer clothing, stronger shelters. Fire becomes essential, not optional. Cooperation intensifies for hunting. Large prey in such harsh conditions requires coordinated effort. These pressures select for adaptability, embedding resilience in the human story. To walk in Europe 300,000 years ago is to experience extremes. In the south forests shelter deer and wild boar. In the centre, grasslands stretch wide, herds roaming beneath open skies. In the north, ice rules forbidding and immense. The people who live here are few, their lives precarious, but their persistence shapes the lineage that will endure for millennia. The lesser-known fact is that even in frozen conditions, plant life persists. Mosses and lichens cling to rocky ground, feeding reindeer, and sustaining fragile ecosystems. Small flowers bloom briefly in summer, colouring the tundra with unexpected brightness. These modest plants, overlooked in the scale of ice and mammoths, are vital threads in the web of life. They remind us that survival depends not only on giants, but also on the smallest forms sustaining herds that in turn sustain humans. Mysteries remain about whether early humans observed the movements of ice, recognizing its slow advance and retreat. To them, glaciers may have seemed eternal, unchanging within a lifetime. Yet over generations, stories may have preserved memories of valleys, lost rivers, redirected lands swallowed by white. These oral traditions, if they existed, are gone, but they would have been the first human attempts to make sense of a restless planet. On the planetary scale, the glaciers are cycles within cycles, part of the rhythm dictated by Earth's orbit and tilt. On the human scale, they are boundaries, challenges, and mysteries. They are both destructive and generative, erasing old worlds while creating new ones. 300,000 years ago, the ice reigns in the north, silent and immense, shaping climates and migrations, hiding landscapes beneath its frozen weight. For the humans at its margins, survival is fragile, but adaptation is possible. In their fires and tools lies resilience, in their cooperation lies strength. They endure not because the earth is kind, but because they bend to its demands. This is the mystery beneath the ice, a world erased, a record concealed, and a human story unfolding in the shadows of glaciers that come and go like the tides of deep time. The Earth, 300,000 years ago, is a planet both alien and familiar, its rhythms slower than memory, yet insistent, shaping everything that lives upon it. Ice weighs heavy on the north, deserts shift like restless seas, rivers carve and vanish, forests breathe with climate and savannas pulse with migrations. Across this changing stage, humans exist in small scattered groups, fragile yet persistent, carrying firestone and memory. They are not yet many, not yet dominant, but they endure, adapting to a world that is vast, unpredictable, and often harsh. Their presence is subtle. They leave stone flakes on riverbanks, charcoal in caves, footprints hardened into mud. These traces, when found millennia later, reveal not grandeur but survival, not conquest but resilience. Theirs is a quiet existence woven into ecosystems rather than ruling over them. They share the world with lions larger than any alive today, with mammoths that darken horizons, with hippos wallowing in rivers that now run dry, with crocodiles in lakes where only sand remains. The balance of life belongs not to them alone, but to every species bound to the land. Yet within their fires flicker possibilities unseen in other creatures. The scraping of ochre, the deliberate flaking of stone, the organization of camps, suggest minds capable of abstraction, foresight, and social bonds. These beginnings are faint, but they foreshadow the symbolic worlds and complex societies that will follow. What remains mysterious is how far their thoughts reached. Did they imagine beyond the immediate, or did meaning emerge only slowly across countless generations? We cannot know. The evidence is incomplete, fragmented, erased by time. The silence of the record is as striking as its traces. On the planetary scale, this world is a living system in constant transformation. Ice sheets advance and retreat, seas rise and fall, climates shift with the tilt of the Earth. These cycles are indifferent to human presence, their pace measured in millennia, their scope spanning continents. For humanity, they are both obstacle and teacher. The instability of the planet forces adaptation, ensuring that survival belongs not to the strongest, but to the most flexible. These cycles will continue long after shaping not only human history, but the Earth itself. To imagine the closing of a day in this world is to see firelight flickering in darkness. A group sits close together, warmth pushing back, cold smoke rising into the night. Around them stretches a landscape vast and indifferent grasslands, where predators hunt rivers swollen with meltwater forests dense with shadows. The sky overhead is brilliant stars sharp without haze of cities or lights, the Milky Way a river of light arching across the dark. In this sky, humans may have seen patterns, though no trace of their thoughts survives. Perhaps they looked upward not only with practical eyes but with wonder, sensing meaning in the immensity above. The lesser-known detail lies in the global scale of their mobility. Even at this early time, humans had spread across Africa and into parts of Europe and Asia. Though their numbers were small, their reach was wide. They lived in deserts, savannas, forests, and steppes, proving that adaptability was already central to their nature. Their journeys were slow, carried out over generations, yet in time they would cross mountains, rivers, and seas, reaching every corner of the earth. Mysteries remain unresolved. How did populations interact? Did groups of Homo sapiens in Africa meet early Neanderthals in Europe at this stage, or did their paths cross only later? How many lineages branched and disappeared, leaving no descendants? The genetic record hints at complexity, but much remains unknown. The Earth hides more than it reveals, preserving some bones while erasing countless others, scattering fragments that can never be reassembled into a full story. On the human scale, these mysteries matter less to those who lived. Their lives were immediate bound to food, water, safety, and kin. They did not know the vast story they were part of, only the daily rhythm of survival. Yet in surviving they carried forward the lineage that would one day ask these questions, looking back across millennia with curiosity and awe. On the planetary scale, humanity was still only one among many, fragile in number and power. The Earth could have erased them as it had countless species before, but they endured fragile bands persisting across shifting landscapes. Their resilience ensured continuity, and continuity allowed transformation. From these small beginnings, the great arc of human history would unfold. To close the story of 300,000 years ago is not to close a chapter, but to recognize its place in continuity. The Earth was not static then, nor is it now. Its cycles of ice and warmth, drought and rain, rise and fall remain the background against which humanity lives. What distinguishes humans is not exemption from these cycles, but the ability to adapt, to imagine, to create meaning. The seeds of that distinction lie already in the faint traces of ochre, in the deliberate shaping of stone, in the care for the injured, in the flicker of firelight shared by a group. These are the beginnings of what will later become art, culture, and civilization. Yet in their own time they are simply survival, ordinary and necessary, the quiet persistence of life. To listen closely to this ancient world is to hear not drama but rhythm, the crunch of snow beneath mammoth feet, the roar of lions across a plain, the crackle of fire, the whisper of wind over dunes. Humanity's presence is woven into this soundscape, neither dominant nor absent, but part of a larger chorus. The epilogue of this age is not triumph but silence, the quiet continuation of cycles, the endurance of life in fragile forms. It is a reminder that much remains unknown, that the Earth has concealed more than it has revealed, that mystery is part of the human inheritance. And so the story rests not in conclusion, but in continuation. 300,000 years ago, the Earth was a different planet, colder, harsher, yet alive with abundance. Humans were few, scattered, and vulnerable, yet within them lay the potential to endure, to adapt, and to transform. The glaciers would advance and retreat, deserts would expand and contract, seas would rise and fall, but the thread of humanity would persist, fragile yet unbroken, carried forward into the long arc of history. This is where our story begins, not with dominance but with survival, not with certainty but with adaptation, not with grandeur but with firelight against the dark.